I was right behind you. Well, you were talking with Dodo. I came up and I said, I hope, but I knew you were talking. So I just kind of went to the other side, but then I think you turned this way.
Yeah, sorry.
Turned opposite from
We're
where I was.
walking around, yeah. Well, okay.
Okay. No. I included you in case you could make it, but if you can't, that's
I
fine.
will reply and say that I will. 1:30 on.
The only thing is, and I don't know if you read my email, is that the radio, yeah, the funding source for radio, I mean, everything was supposed to go to enterprise.
Good afternoon. Mayor, we're ready?
Welcome.
Good afternoon. Notice of a public meeting of the City Commission of the City of Brownsville. Pursuant to Chapter 551, Title 5 of the Texas Government Code, the Texas Open Meetings Act, notice is hereby given that the City Commission of the City of Brownsville, Texas, in accordance with Article 5, Section 12 of the Charter of said city, will convene a regular meeting on February 27, 2023 at 5 p.m. in the City Commission chambers located on the second floor of the Brownsville City Hall, Old Federal Building, located at 1001 East Elizabeth Street. Members of the public who submitted a public comment form will be permitted to offer public comments as provided by the agenda and as permitted by the presiding officer during the meeting. A recording of the meeting will be made and will be available to the public in accordance with the Open Meetings Act. Mayor, it is 5:02. You may call the meeting to order.
Thank you. I'll now call the meeting to order. Welcome, everybody.
Next item is invocation and the Pledge of Allegiance.
All right, I know that Pastor Brad is not here today, but he did ask for somebody else to be here. Who is that? Oh, welcome.
Let's pray together. Heavenly Father, we just ask that you would bless these men and women who are assembled here together and called to lead the city. We ask you would help them to do their best, do even greater things than what they could imagine by your help. And Father, we ask that you would help to lead them to lead us in righteousness that conforms to your standards, and that they would never waver from their commitment to uphold you as their highest among all loyalties. Help them to do what's good and great in your eyes. And we ask this in the name of your Son, Jesus Christ, who died for our sins. Amen.
Thank you. And now we'll take a moment so everybody can add their own prayers. Thank you. Now the pledge. Pledge allegiance to for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Honor the Texas flag.
Next item, we have proclamations. The first proclamation is honoring Beatriz Chiqui Samano.
Do we have anyone from Chardays or the Samano family present? This is
Anybody
a
present online?
proclamation of the City Commission of Brownsville, Texas, honoring Beatriz Chiqui Samano, her life and legacy. Whereas Charo Days is a Brownsville institution and local holiday going back to 1938, which is the greatest representation of our community's culture, celebrated at the end of February each year. And whereas Charo Days represents not only the friendship, amistad, that exists here on the border between Brownsville and Matamoros, the United States and Mexico, but also serves as an example of the incredible benefits which come from nurturing and cultivating relationships of this nature, cultural, social, economic, and more. And whereas all Charo Days has grown to become, can, and is so appropriately and affectionately called the Charo Day spirit, which many on both sides of the border work diligently to embody. And whereas through the years we have found citizens who not only work to embody that spirit, but who do so at such an exceptional level that they become an icon, personifying that spirit, becoming inseparable from its identity, and inspiring others across the community and generations. And whereas Beatrice Chiqui Samano is a citizen who celebrated Char Days since the time she was born, inspired by the breathtaking Char Days dress collection of her mother, and who from the earliest age she was able became involved with the holiday and ultimately with the organization in her early teens. And whereas Chiqui's love, dedication, service, personality, and grito have become synonymous with Char Days, and Chiqui has become the embodiment and personification of the Char Day spirit, caring for others in love and friendship throughout her life. Now, therefore, we, the members of the City Commission of the City of Brownsville, Texas, by virtue of the authority vested by the charter of said city, and on behalf of all our citizens, do hereby celebrate the life and legacy of Beatrice Chiqui Samano and recognize her as an icon in our community who personifies the Char Day spirit, and further call upon all citizens to do the same, to be inspired by a life of love for others, service to the community, and celebration of our culture, and to carry on that great legacy by creating one of your own, which includes striving to embody that same Char Day spirit which Chiqui so loved. Done this 27th day of February, 2023, signed Mayor and City Commissioner of Brownsville.
Do we have anybody here from Char Days or from the Samano family? I know that we don't have anybody in the audience, but is anybody here online? Okay.
Next proclamation, we have a proclamation honoring Rio Grande Valley RGV Border Patrol Chief Gloria Chavez.
Chief Chavez, welcome. Would you like to come on up here, please? Commissioner Tetra and I co-sponsored this proclamation, so I'm going to see if you'd like to read it.
Yes, and I really wanted to do it especially with you because the incredible thing, we're so proud of Chief Chavez, but she is a Porter High School graduate like you, Mayor. And we're so proud of her. What an honor it is to have you here with us today and to be celebrating this monumental occasion at City Hall. And these proclamations really are supposed to go to outstanding individuals. And I could not think of anybody that we are more proud of than you for this incredible appointment that you have been given. And so you make us proud every day. And I want you to know how many little girls and women are proud of your accomplishments and the fact that you come from our public school system and are a graduate of TSC and have made your way and are now appointed to this position and looking over us, keeping us safe. So thank you so much. And it's an honor to read this to you and have you here today.
Thank you. Yeah, it's going to be a lengthy proclamation, Commissioner, so save some of those words. But yeah, before that, not just women and young women that you're inspiring, but also a generation of Porter graduates, men and young men as well, Chief. I mean, you've represented us so fantastically on the biggest stages, and now it's a great honor to welcome you back home. Yes. Thank you. Thank you.
Yes, and I don't know what Porter did right, but I found out that she also graduated with our police chief. So keep up the good work, Porter. Keeping us safe, Porter. All right, this is a proclamation of the City Commission of Brownsville, Texas, recognizing and honoring Border Patrol Chief Gloria Chavez. Whereas Border Patrol Chief Patrol Agent Gloria I. Chavez grew up in a Mexican-American family in Brownsville, Texas. Chief Patrol Agent Chavez graduated from Porter High School and attended Texas Southmost College before moving to Corpus Christi, where she began her law enforcement career with the Nueces County Sheriff's Office and then the Taft Police Department. And whereas Chief Chavez earned a Master of Arts degree in Security Studies, Homeland Security, and Defense from the Naval Postgraduate School. She graduated magna cum laude with a Bachelor of Science degree in Criminal Justice Administration from Columbia Southern University. She is a graduate of the Senior Executive Fellow Program of the John F. Kennedy School of Government at Harvard University. Wow. Whereas in May 1995, Chief Chavez joined the U.S. Border Patrol as a member of Class 285. Chief Chavez successfully served in a variety of senior leadership positions on the northern and southern borders of the United States to include 2 tours of duty at Customs and Border Patrol Protection Headquarters following the creation of OHS. In 2005, Chief Chavez was assigned to the Office of Strategic Policy, Planning and Analysis and the Special Operations Division Foreign Operations Branch within the U.S. Border Patrol Headquarters. In 2007, Chief Chavez returned to the field of Assistant Chief Patrol Agent in the San Diego sector. In 2008, Chief Chavez sought and accepted the position of Patrol Agent in charge of the Chula Vista Station in San Diego sector. And whereas, in 2010, Chief Chavez assumed command of the Spokane sector in Spokane, Washington, along the U.S.-Canada border. In 2015, she accepted the position of Deputy Chief for the operations under the Law Enforcement Operations Directorate of the U.S. Border Patrol Headquarters in Washington, D.C. In 2016 and 2017, she served as the Customs Border Patrol Commander for the Customs Border Patrol Migration Crisis Team, where she monitored and addressed the day-to-day operational requirements and challenges for the Customs and Border Patrol enterprise. In recognition of her efforts, she was presented with the 2017 Office of Homeland Security Secretary Silver Medal Award. In 2018, Chief Chavez once again assumed command in a field post as Chief Patrol Agent of the El Centro sector in Imperial, California, along the U.S.-Mexico border. In 2020, Chief Patrol Agent Chavez had assumed command of the Border Patrol's El Paso sector to 2022. And whereas Chief Chavez, a 27-year veteran of the U.S. Border Patrol and the highest-ranking female agent in the agency, has officially entered duty as the Chief Patrol Agent of the U.S. Border Patrol Rio Grande Valley sector. Now, therefore, we, the members of the City Commission of the City of Brownsville, Texas, by virtue of the authority vested in the charter of said city, and on behalf of all of our citizens, do hereby recognize and honor Border Patrol Chief Gloria I. Chavez for her achievements and welcome her home. Done on this 27th day of February, 2023.
Mayor, everyone, thank you so much. Thank you so very much. Very much.
Yeah, please. Thank you so much, Chief. Viola Porter.
Next, we have proclamation recognizing Texas Heat Ballroom Dance Team.
Do we have anybody here?
Yes.
Come on up. Commissioner Cowan's going to read this proclamation for you. Thank you. Come on up, please.
Okay, this is a proclamation of the City Commission of Brownsville, Texas, recognizing Texas Heat Ballroom Dance Team. Whereas Texas Heat will be the first 100% Hispanic ballroom dance team to compete at the United States National Amateur Dance Championships. And whereas Texas Heat team is entering a national competition for the first time and have been working in training since June. The team is composed of 17 students: Jose de la Garza, Samantha Aldape, Hector Lara, Coro Garza, Giovanni Lopez, Cindy Mesa, Alexis Campos, Nia Garza, Alex Salinas, Haley Guajardo, Angel Estrada, Maura Sanchez, Christopher Mesa, Alex Nicholson, Isis Perez, Ethan Ramirez, and Jenna Gonzalez. The team will be competing at the 2023 United States National Amateur Dance Sport Championships from March 7th through the 11th in Provo, Utah. And whereas Texas Heat will be the first ballroom dance team to represent the city of Brownsville and the state of Texas at the United States National Amateur Dance Championships. And whereas Texas Heat will be the first ballroom dance team to represent the International Fred Astaire Dance Studios franchise at the United States National Amateur Dance Championships. And whereas Texas Heat will be the first ballroom dance team to be sponsored by Dancing Through Life, a nonprofit organization that provides ballroom in schools at the United States National Amateur Dance Championships. Now, therefore, we, the members of the City Commission of the City of Brownsville, Texas, by virtue of the authority vested by the charter of said city, and on behalf of all our citizens, do hereby recognize Texas Heat Ballroom Dance Team for their achievements, done on this, the 27th day of February, 2023.
Please feel free to say a few words at the podium if you'd like. We just say the podium, that way the folks at home watching can hear you. Thank you all so much.
Okay, that's better. I just wanted to just take this time to thank all of you for doing this. It's a journey for sure. We started in June of 2022, and we were invited, a professional, when we go to compete in Houston, actually saw the kids perform and asked me, have you ever thought about taking them to a national competition? And I'm like, no. We don't have any kids to compete against here in Texas. When we go to Houston, we compete against ourselves because there aren't any young kids that compete. There are young students that compete across the United States, but not in Texas. So when this was brought to our attention, and this woman is a world-renowned Fred Astaire professional in her time and is now on the International Dance Council, she was like, I really think these kids have the talent to do this. And I had seen videos and I'm like, gosh, I don't know. I don't know if this can happen. You know, they're very talented, but it's extremely competitive. So she adopted us and the whole Fred Astaire franchise actually, and they decided that they were going to do whatever they could to make it happen for these kids. As you all know, we are a very economically disadvantaged, right, community, the students as well, their families as well. So this organization, through Dancing Through Life and through the Fred Astaire franchise, raised all of the money, which it's costing close to $100,000 to send these students, which includes their outfits, their shoes, training that they've been receiving from national choreographers, an opportunity that these students will maybe never have again. And of course, the most thing that we're proud of is the fact that they are 100% Hispanic. We're going to Provo, Utah, so that will be a shock. But most of the teams that compete are from Idaho, Iowa, different states like that, never before from the state of Texas. So we're really proud of that. The kids have come a long way, and I invite all of you to go on Friday. They're not here right now because they're rehearsing. Our last two rehearsals that we have this week before we take off to Utah over the weekend. But we will be doing a send-off performance at Kenmont Gym at 7:00 p.m. and they're going to perform everything that they're going to be competing in Utah. So that way the community, family members can go and see the incredibly talented students that we have right here in Brownsville. So I thank you all for taking the time to do this proclamation, and it will be great for whoever goes on Friday. So the students will actually be able to be there for the reading of the proclamation as well. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks for putting this on our radar. And I think it really just goes to show that if children from Brownsville or youth from Brownsville get an opportunity, that's all they need. Once they get that opportunity, they can show that they belong on the biggest stages anywhere and compete with the best. So thank you so much for allowing that and really lifting them up.
Thank you.
Next item, we have public comment period. We have 5 public comments.
Okay?
First one is Chris Hambley.
Chris Hamby, are they here? Okay, next.
Okay, next we have Miss Allison Luong.
Allison here? No? Okay.
Next we have Miss Karen O'Brien.
Is anybody online, maybe?
Well, I mean, yeah, I assume that some of these folks would be online. Is there anybody? Okay.
Next we have Hector Ruiz. He signed up, but just wished to
Just register?
register his opinion.
I think that was a sign up for public comment at the task force meeting last week.
And then we have Javier Cantu, just register his opinion.
Okay,
Okay.
thank you.
Next item, we have work sessions. Item number 1, downtown event temporary street closure.
Good afternoon, Mayor, Commissioners. Nice to see you all today. Hope you guys had a good weekend. As you know, the downtown is growing. It's progressively changing in a positive way. It's being revitalized. And with that revitalization comes some changes, maybe some of those changes that we haven't necessarily seen so much of in the past. We're starting to see activation of the Market Square area more and more. We're starting to see events requests more and more in the downtown area. In front of you, you'll have some of the street closures that staff worked on, assisted with within the past year. Also, like I mentioned, a lot of activity is happening, and one of the things that we haven't necessarily seen so much of until now is the requests for street closures. We're starting to see requests for street closures as part of First Friday more and more, and then we're also starting to see requests for street closures for private events. Right? Currently, there isn't necessarily a policy in place, but staff, with your assistance, with your guidance, is looking for a policy that we can get to fairly soon. So at this point, staff's looking for a direction as far as street closures for First Friday and for private events while we work up to that policy. And as well, I would like to share some of the plans that I have for the next 45 days. That includes preparing a draft for y'all to look at and give me some guidance on that. Put it together, hold a meeting with the downtown business owners and get their feedback as well. Get some of their thoughts, so that I can package that as well and bring that before commission for another workshop and then possibly a public hearing item. So just to recap, staff's looking for direction for street closures during First Friday. we're starting to see more activations, more requests for street closures. We do have those business owners who are looking to close streets for private events. You typically see street closures for DJs or vendors, musicians, in that aspect during Friday and Saturday. And that happens generally from 9 a.m. to about 12, midnight, 2 a.m. That typically involves setting up the stage, getting in coordination with the vendors, removing the cars that parked. And then you have the other side of the spectrum where the other business owners feel like that may negatively impact their business because streets are closed, their clients can't find parking, it doesn't allow for the flow of traffic. So because these street closures requests for private events typically happen on Friday and Saturday, I'm told that that's generally the more profitable time for the other business owners who are objecting some of these street closures. Yes, I don't have any additional comments and I'm available for questions at this time.
Yeah, what's the current policy right now on street closures for events?
It pretty much, I function as a liaison, kind of to let Public Works, traffic, other departments like PD know that business owners is considering to have a street closed. But for the most part, it's really about talking to city engineer and the traffic department and close up the streets and pay the fee.
Just from experience, what I've seen on First Fridays, there used to be an issue with the traffic flow through Adams. I think you have to look at the main arteries, right? I think you need to look at 12th Street. I certainly don't suggest closing 12th because that's a way in. 12th and 13th, 6th and 7th are always arteries in and out. I think you need to be conscious of that. And then also on Adams, and I think you've made progress closing 11th instead of 12th, which I think has proven to be pretty good. I would suggest continuing to do that. But then also, I think taking advantage of some of the city parking lots is helpful as well for parking, because parking always becomes an issue during these events. So I think being mindful of that, even considering opening up some of these city parking lots would be helpful. And also not just opening them up, but letting people know where they are so that they can actually take advantage of those. Because I've never once seen a map of city-owned parking lots. I know that they're there and they're empty on weekends. Possibly even coordinating with the church, see if we could use their parking lot would be helpful as well. I don't know that there's ever been any sort of agreement there. But I think if city-owned parking lots are ever allowed to be used, there should also be some sort of wayfinder or some sort of map that would allow people to know exactly where those are. And then on street closures for private events, I think that there should be a fee associated with that. I think there should be some sort of way to stop it from happening every day just because, right? I think some of those are being taken advantage of. I've seen that. So I think having a fee associated with that would kind of make it, I wouldn't say a barrier to entry, but it would be, I think the individuals that are asking for it would be more conscious of that if there's a fee associated with it.
Mayor, in response to your question, we currently don't have a policy adopted by council. We do require traffic control plans in order to do a road closure at this time.
Regarding wayfinding, I have asked staff we've received those comments from businesses, and so we are working on signage with regard to, this is where there is public parking, lots and garage, the typical P that you see when you go to downtowns, but a nice sign that has like P for parking this way with an arrow. And so we are, that's something I think we're just refining the design and putting them up.
So a couple of comments I want to make on this. And I think I've got a little experience with street closures related to Sombrero Festival. First, with regard to a traffic control plan. And I know that there was some controversy on this at one time because we were requiring the events to go out and find an engineer and pay for the engineer to put together the traffic flow plan, but then it still had to be approved by the city. We know our streets, we know our traffic routes, we have engineers. As far as I'm concerned, we should be designing the traffic flow plan and say, if this is going to be where the closure is, this is the traffic flow plan. Same for any other different part of downtown. And the same would be true for any other part of the city. We do it for Ciclovia. When we're closing streets, we do it right now. We've got a section of 7th that's going to be closed for several weeks. We're doing that. There's no reason we shouldn't do this proactively so that as these nonprofit events are coming up, they don't have to bear the cost of that. Plus, Who is a better expert to decide where traffic should flow than our own traffic department and city engineers? Next thing, the safety aspect. As these events grow, and this is something that Sombrero Festival faced, we had been asking to close at least Madison for years. And it was always no, because it's an artery. But when the new administration came in of the police department, they raised the issue, why have you not closed these streets? Because if somebody wanted to attack an event for mass casualty, you're a sitting duck because the streets are wide open right by the event. That's something that needs to be considered. So as you work on this ordinance and this policy, I urge you to have the police department actively engage in anything we're planning, because those are things that are very important for consideration. Everything else I agree with. The fees, appropriate fees so that we don't have this happening by just anyone and just at any time. We want to make sure it's a good organization or a good group of business owners, very organized, and that the city will see some return on investment. I think there should also be requirements in there, because it's something we proactively do, of going door to door to every resident in that vicinity or business owner who's going to be affected, and informing them of what the plan is, what the traffic routes, and if they need any type of credentials to ensure they will have easy access to their residences or their businesses. And especially one of the issues that we saw is we have folks who are bartenders. So they're coming home at 2 and 3 o'clock in the morning and streets are blocked off. And you have security guards out there, but they're like, sorry, we're closed, you can't come in. They need to have something that identifies them as a resident so that they're let in regardless of the time.
And I think, Alan, you've done a great job being proactive with business owners down in the area. I hear a lot of great things on how you're interacting with them face to face, going out there regularly, kind of letting them know what's happening. So, great
Right.
job.
Like Commissioner Dos Santos was mentioning, something that allows them to know what's happening ahead of time, maybe similar to what we see with zoning ordinances or rezoning amendments, something like that, to where if something's happening, kind of give everybody a heads up. Currently, I'm going to door to door and letting them know that this might be happening. So maybe we can send something out and also, double check in person. Any additional comments from the commission?
Well, I think we should take advantage of the alleys as well. I mean, there may be a few alleys you just have to maybe put a little money into, Dodo, and be able to use those alleys as exits or entrances to certain other streets.
It's actually not a bad idea, but to that end too, there's a lot of individuals that park in the alleys on the weekends. That needs to be better regulated. Whenever I see it, I get in touch with PD about it. They do a fantastic job, but it shouldn't really be up to me to make that call. I think it's something that should be looked at because it happens every single weekend.
I'm really glad that you're bringing this before us because I'm somebody who has represented the city when there weren't that many events downtown, and I'm very much appreciating and enjoying and visiting all of the events that we're having now. And it used to be that before I would be very afraid to come alone at night to an event downtown, but I have to say that in the last year, I feel very safe and confident coming by myself, even alone, because of all of the measures in place that are being put into the process when we have these closures and events.
Absolutely.
So thank you for all of the work that's been put into that. I know that was a monumental task, and I feel like we're there. We're in a real good place downtown right now, and I'm enjoying
Thank
it.
you, absolutely, and we're only going to get better.
Yes.
Alan, and so do you still require a study by an engineer in order to be able to close a street?
Typically, the street closures that are required most, or that are requested mostly is on Adams between East 11th and East 12th. And during First Friday, we don't have any traffic control plan requirements. Private?
So in the areas where we have frequent events, we use previous studies that have been completed. On the new areas that we get requested, those are the ones we usually request for new traffic studies.
Okay. And the reason I ask that is because I know that sometimes it's nonprofits that are applying for these street closures. And so having that additional cost is prohibitive to them. So maybe be able to weigh when it's something like the Brownsville Performing Arts Academy that they're doing a street festival or something, especially if it's just in front of their building, maybe make it a little easier for them.
We'll definitely make it a point to consult with legal just to make sure that we're safe. And the reason for hiring a consultant is really more liability purposes.
I think the approach, Noro, and from what I'm hearing from commissioners is if it's a frequently closed street that we know the typical correct traffic pattern that we would need as good practice.
Correct.
If it's something unique, well, that may warrant with, of course, additional analysis. So it's just,
That's what we've been
being
doing.
customer friendly in that
Correct.
sense. Like, don't make them go through a 3-month process if we normally know that that street is just to make them go through a process.
And I think as a city also, we can even say that these are the areas we're going to support closures in because it makes sense. And these are areas where we absolutely would not, because we just don't think it would be a good idea.
Well, yeah, and then I think, like the side streets, 11th, 12th, 10th, whatever, there's no parking spaces there. So closing those is a lot easier, but every block you close, let's say on Adams, on Washington, Jefferson, it's going to be about 20 to 24 parking spaces that you're losing
Right,
from
and
that.
there's
closure.
also, I believe, handicaps on Adams between 11 and 12 as well. And like I mentioned earlier, when you're setting up a stage, that typically takes a long period of time. So it's not just like an hour before the event. So you're closing the street basically for the whole day almost.
Right, yeah, that is true. Yep.
Also to be courteous to the fire department to make sure they're able to access either side.
Oh,
without-
absolutely, yes.
Yeah.
And on the notice, on the comment about handicap parking, and that's something that we do at the festival, is we make sure we provide additional handicap parking if there's any spaces that are going to be interrupted as a result of the event and the closures.
So I think at this point, out of the 7 First Fridays that we've had, we closed Adams about 4 times. I think I did my calculations. But at this point, I think we can get a compromise with maybe closing just 11th for now until we get maybe a policy and we can discuss that with the business owners. Is that okay with the commission?
Sure.
Any additional questions or comments?
Well, I do think as First Friday continues to grow, that's when you should start really looking into closing streets. We shouldn't just close them to close them. I remember there was a stage on, is it Adams? And
Yes,
I
there
don't-
was a stage once or twice on Adams.
Yeah, I don't think it needed to be there. I think it could have been on Market Square. And you don't need to close that street. Maybe we just put a few officers there to have people cross to stop traffic. But I think something like that would work a lot better than just closing the street just to put a stage on.
And I'd just like to add, I think is there a process to get feedback from the business owners, say, after the event to see what the city could do to improve, their
Well,
experience?
we're definitely going to start doing that. We generally meet before First Friday, about 2 weeks before First Friday to kind of see how we're going and how we can improve. I know throughout the process or throughout First Friday, we've progressively added things like picnic tables, allowing alcohol sales, having a public works department there on site during the event to help clean. So there's little things that we've discussed here and there to make it better. It's just this specific topic that gets, a little bit, controversial between business owners.
And because I'm not familiar, is there something for residents in the area where they can, so that they don't have to struggle with finding parking when these events happen?
Residential owners already have an option to buy pass, if I'm not mistaken, or find their own find a parking area with a specific pass because they're living in downtown. So if they can't find a parking within that area, that street closed, they're still able to find parking elsewhere.
Okay. Is it a designated space?
I don't believe so.
All right, thanks.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Next item, we have Historic Preservation Plan, Tax Abatement Program.
Good afternoon, Mayor, Commissioners. Next slide, please. Okay. This is a summary of the 2023 Preservation Plan. It has 113 properties, and the foregone for the city of Brownsville will be $125,000. The next slide shows, well, as you can see here, there are 3 schedules, A, B, and C. A regards to federal and state properties exempted with 100%, local designations with a 50%, and finally substantial rehab with a 100%. Schedule B simply allows a commission member to abstain, and Schedule C, as we can see here in this slide, may not achieve conformance to the ordinance that regards to taxation. And there's simply here a line saying that the Historic Preservation Commission and the Planning and Zoning didn't recommend properties number 5 and 6. The next slide shows, it's a reminder of the 9 criteria that any designated property has to follow. And that's it. So if you have any questions.
I'm sorry, Juan, on 5 and 6, can you just go back? You said something about non-conformance?
Yep.
Okay. There's a list of 8. So is it just those 2 particular properties?
Yeah, so the point of the slide, Mayor, is just that the Historic Preservation Commission did not recommend approval of properties 5 and 6, and the P and Z followed the HPC's recommendation.
Okay, but is there a reason that Schedule C is carved out on its own?
So there's, all the properties on Schedule C have some deficiency with meeting the ordinance.
Okay.
And
got it.
so in your, did you pass those out already? On your table, I believe you have Schedule C. There's highlighted areas on Schedule C. The highlights illustrate what that particular property doesn't meet.
Okay. Thank you.
So on that,
Just the P and Z and HPC did
Both.
recommend approval of Schedule C with the exception of 5 and 6.
And both of them were in agreement on all of the ones on Schedule C?
Correct.
Oh, okay.
except 5 and 6.
That's right.
On those, though, the comment says they may not achieve conformance. Has a determination been made whether or not they do? Because I'm concerned about excluding somebody because they may not without confirming whether or not they do.
Based on the staff's review, we feel they did not meet the 9 criteria.
No,
And,
they
or
do not
there's
meet
some-
conformance to the City of Brownsville code?
Well,
it is the City of Brownsville code.
Okay.
particularly one, what was the issues with the Crest and Souter? Because I don't know necessarily what the issues would be with any of those properties.
Yeah, some of them do not have any kind of preservation activity. We have to distinguish between maintenance and preservation, rehabilitation. And so some others have exceed the years in which they were allowed. Some others didn't meet what it was agreed.
Just for 5 and 6, there was no preservation activity.
Okay.
Just for the record, since I'm one of the owners of both buildings, I'm okay with it being denied. Because, yeah, I didn't realize that it was being considered.
Yeah, but having seen some of this in the past, I just want to know what the issues are because those 2 buildings, the Crest, for example, has tenants and it seems to be in pretty good condition. So I don't know what the issue would be, right? And then also, I'm not familiar necessarily with the other building, which one that is.
It's the one where Ben lives.
Okay, I can see that one being a little bit different, but I don't see an issue with Crest just off the top of my head. And then the other one, I'm not familiar with it enough. But I don't personally see an issue with Crest, but that's why I was asking what the Preservation Committee had seen that maybe we don't know about.
Well, when Juan reviews a property's eligibility for inclusion in the plan, he uses these ordinance required 9 criteria. And so he'll go one by one, and if they're compliant, they'll be in Schedule A. And if there's a deficiency, they would fall into C, just to disclose and be transparent with the commission, and then y'all can make a decision whether they're included or not included.
We're also using a consultant. I don't know if you want to talk about our consultant services to assist with certain analysis.
So there's a particular property that has entered into the state and federal National Park Service program. They've gone through the process of submitting their documentation both to the state and the federal government, and they were awarded tax credits. They were awarded 25% income tax credits from the state and 20% income tax credits from the federal government. It does require that you then implement your plan. And so there's a question by the Texas Historic Commission whether or not that plan is being implemented. We included it on the Schedule C so that the commission can consider that particular property because we've hired a consultant, an architect with expertise in historic preservation to assist that individual, which try to bring her project into compliance with the federal and state program.
Which one is that?
Property number 1.
Oh,
If you comply with the federal and state program, you're automatically considered for the city's 100% tax exemption, and that's in perpetuity. It'll come to you every year for approval, so we just want to make sure.
unless there's an issue with maintenance or something like that.
That's correct. That's where your historic preservation officer, through the ordinance, has the authority to recommend to the commission, if you fail to maintain your property over time, you can be taken out of the program.
Whenever this comes, this isn't a voting item tonight. Whenever this does come back for any properties that are going to be recommended for exclusion, first, these I would like digitally. Because I want to be able to review these digitally. But also, when this comes back, if there's going to be something that is for a vote, if there's properties that are going to be recommended for exclusion, I'd like to see something in that deck specifically on those and why they're being recommended for exclusion. Not just the reason, but I want to see photographs saying here's where it doesn't comply, has not been restored, whatever the case might be.
Okay.
And for those that are recommended for denial on Schedule C, or some of them, were the building owners notified and given an opportunity to bring it into compliance?
Certainly, number 1 is, I'm not sure about the remainder if we've had that conversation with them. We have not.
We discussed that during historic preservation.
Now, they're not recommended for denial. They're recommended for, other than 5 and 6, 1 through 8 is recommended for approval by the Historic Preservation Commission and the Planning and Zoning Commission. We're just pointing out to the commission for transparency's sake that there are issues with those particular properties.
Does staff agree with those recommendations?
We agree with the Historic Preservation Commission.
So the only ones you have issues with is 5 and 6, which is next door?
That's correct.
Next door and
Not we, the Historic Preservation Commission. Yes, sir.
next door and in front of Terrace, I guess.
So if you want to, I mean, for the sake of staff's recommendation, I would say if the commission's inclined to approve Schedule C, that the staff would then work on the criteria and come back to the commission with a revised set of criteria to bring these properties into compliance with the criteria. And then in the future properties will be able to apply under the new criteria. That's what we would do.
And I just think that's always good practice, because when I served this chair, I would always want the property owners to know that their exemption was in jeopardy and be given some reasonable opportunity to bring it into compliance. I think that's really good practice. I would highly suggest that, doing that. I'm not sure when this meeting occurred. I know we used to do it in November, December. So I think, just in all fairness, I think giving the building owner a reasonable opportunity, whether that's a month or 2 months or something, is good practice. I don't know whether that's occurred. If it's not, I would suggest considering that in the future.
We will do that, Mayor. We also have some properties that clearly have exceeded the authority granted to the staff to consider for approval in the program. There may be a 5-year deadline and they're already on their 7th year. And so bringing them back to you would be their 8th year. And so we would recommend that the commission reconsider the program criteria. And if the commission desires to grant additional years, we'll just build in a 10-year timeline or something.
That's a substantial rehab?
That's for the substantial.
There's still some on there that are past the 5 years?
Yes, sir.
Okay, because, yeah, I thought that automatically just fell off and they just came off the list. But there's still some
They
that
were
are.
recommended for extension by the HPC and then followed by the P&Z as well.
Okay. Yeah, I think there should be a fixed timeline on something like that. Okay, thanks. Juan, thank you.
Amy.
Can I ask one more, or, so Carlota Petrina's not in here, right? I don't know that, Carlota Petrina.
It is eligible to consider at your next meeting for approval.
Oh.
It's number 1
Under schedule, which one?
on Schedule C.
Oh, under schedule C.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, that's not it.
It's number 4, so it is also here.
The MH Cross?
Oh, okay. I didn't know that was what it was called.
I would love to have a meeting with you all if it were possible next week. Because I mean, this is in District 4.
Yes, sir.
I'd love to sit with you all so we can get a idea of what we can do.
Okay.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thanks.
Next item, we have presentations. Proposed traffic impact fee study.
Good evening, Mayor, City Commissioners. As you're aware, we've been working on the BTX mobility plan for some time. A task in that master plan does have for our consultants to look at a potential traffic impact fees. And so we have Mr. Eddie Haas on the line to give a quick presentation on what that means for the city of Brownsville.
Very good. Joel, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Please go ahead.
Okay, very good. Very good. Good evening. My name's Edmund Haas with Friesen Nichols. Thank you for the opportunity to bring this item before you. What this item is really the first step in the potential consideration of road impact fees in Brownsville. There's a very prescriptive requirements set forth by Chapter 395 of the Texas Local Government Codes. It not only outlines technical requirements, but also administrative requirements. And so this is that first step in calling for the first of 2 public hearings. And so on the next slide here, I don't know if I can advance the slides there. Well, there we go. What this program is really all about is a funding tool to help implement the plan. You all have done an exceptional amount of planning, comprehensive planning, infrastructure planning, and the top right image there, that's the draft thoroughfare plan from your upcoming mobility plan. These plans all need funding sources. We're focused solely on roads though, but as a funding mechanism, impact fees will help to defray the cost of infrastructure. It will put a portion of that cost on new development to chip in for a portion of that. And so that's what we've been charged to do, is to develop the program to then ultimately bring that before you to consider the potential implementation of this program. So the basic philosophical approach boils down to who pays for growth. From the land use assumptions that we've been preparing, Brownsville is anticipated to grow by about 40,000 people over the next 10 years. Employment's going to increase by another 29, almost 30,000 persons. That's generating demand for new road improvements. Those improvements are expensive, and there's really only 2 basic funding sources. You've got impact fees, in which new development pays for a portion of that cost, or you have your existing tax base, which picks up the cost of that program. So philosophically, if impact fees go forward, the premise is that new development should help pay their way. And so, as I mentioned earlier, the mobility plan, which is in draft form, that's being developed by the multimodal teams, that's going to be coming before you. This impact fee program is rooted in that mobility plan, specifically the thoroughfare plan. Specific roads from the thoroughfare plan can be considered for for impact fee consideration. And these are really only capacity enhancing projects. So bottom line, as new growth comes to Brownsville, there's the demand for roads that needed improvements to address that growth. This is where the impact fee programs to help pick up a portion of that cost. So as I mentioned earlier, Chapter 395, it's codified and identifies all the requirements. One of those is the Capital Improvements Advisory Committee. We have been meeting with the designated committee. We've met 4 times now to review land use assumptions, how we see ourselves growing over the next 10 years, the 10-year period 2032 through 2033. We've talked about a preliminary capital improvements plan. So they've met, we've talked about these things. This is where we're going forward with this resolution tonight. This calls for the first of 2 public hearings to review land use assumptions and to review the capital improvements plan that's been recommended by the CIAC. Most importantly, it does not mean you have impact fees. It's really only a stepping stone toward the second public hearing. When we do the cost calculation, we quantify what's it going to cost for a unit of service, what are impact fees generally going to be for general types of land uses, et cetera. That's where you will consider, do we want to implement impact fees? If so, do we want to have a collection rate? What is that collection rate? Okay, so on the next slide, we basically identify that an impact fee is going to be a one-time fee that new development pays. If the development generates a lot of traffic demand and there's the need for capacity enhancing improvements, the higher the fee. So you can see how it's a structured approach for new development that will be considered by staff. There'll be an assessment and then a collection, assessment at plating, collection at permit. More importantly, with the impact fee program, new development only pays for their fair share. They don't pay any more, they don't pay any less. This is a very structured program based on travel characteristics of different kinds of land use. So we can quantify specifically how much demand is going to be generated. We can quantify what's that impact and what's the cost of that impact. And then the policy question that ultimately will come before you is, what should we ask new development to chip in? Okay. By way of process, on the next slide is where we are, where we have developed the land use assumptions. We're in the process of rolling out the draft plan before staff. In that report, there's also the identification of the road capital improvements plan. Where we're going is item 3 on this slide, and that is the April 18th public hearing. This resolution calls for a public hearing to consider LUA and CIP for the potential imposition of impact fees. There will be a 30-day notice that'll go out March 17th. On or before March 17th, we'll have that report made available to the public so that can be reviewed as desired. But you will then get a presentation. I'll be down for that presentation on April 18th. If that passes the commission, we will then go through the second step of the study, where we're putting the cost to all the projects that have been identified, preparing all the technical reports, and then working toward a second public hearing that we've tentatively identified for September 19th. The final step will be an impact fee ordinance, where it'll codify, how the impact fee program will work, when it's assessed, when it's collected, et cetera, et cetera. It's important for Brownsville. Oops, this is a duplicate on the next slide there. This is an important program for Brownsville as a funding mechanism to help pay for needed capacity that's going to be generated from new growth. But more importantly, new development will know exactly what their fee is going to be. We'll have cost calculators that'll be made available online. New development, the developers will be able to calculate based on their type of whatever the application is, residential, office, commercial, whatever. They'll be able to calculate what that fee is going to be. And it's based, again, on a demand-driven, so it's kind of a systematic approach that levels the playing field. Will developers get credit? Yes. If a developer builds a road that's on the thoroughfare plan, the cost of those roads can be applied toward the impact fee. So there'll be some specific language on that. With that, I'll entertain any questions you might have regarding the program, but really it's the kickoff for the resolution calling for that initial public hearing on land use assumptions and capital improvements plans.
I do have one question, and forgive me if I missed this, but will the proposed fees be available prior to the public hearing?
The second public hearing, yes. All that cost per service unit, or what it costs to put a unit of road on the ground, that'll be made available, along with what might typical fees be for, I don't know, typically we do benchmark scenario samples of a single family residence, or 10,000 square feet of office, 25,000 square feet of commercial, just general items like that. But we'll have some samples of what those fees might look like.
The reason I'm asking is it kind of doesn't make sense to have a public hearing on proposed fees if you don't have the proposed fees available prior to the public hearing.
Right, but this is just for the first step to get to that second public hearing, which is the potential imposition of the program. So we're just talking specifically, how are we going to grow? What's the capital improvements to address growth? That's part of the first public hearing per Chapter 395.
I would also say, in my experience with the city of Hutto, we went through a mobility plan and traffic impact fee. They'll normally give us a range, low and high end, and the city commission can really look at the dynamics of residential, apartment, 100,000 square foot industrial, and really identify possible going on the high range, on the low range, on the mid range. So it's something that doesn't have to be hard and fast high range. They do give you kind of an analysis of what similar sized cities have done. And also, the impact on the roads, since we do have a $78 million maintenance tab to deal with. But in terms of future, just paying for itself, future new growth, paying for itself.
I share the mayor's concerns. It sounds like we're putting the cart before the horse because I've seen in my experience here in Brownsville, when you go out to public hearings and open up this box for discussion and you don't have the answers yet, you give rise to all sorts of conspiracy theories and fear for the public. And doing that is irresponsible of us, especially when we've got an election coming up. I think it's very important before you ever have that first public hearing, we know this is what the future growth looks like. This is what the costs are going to be. These are the ways we could fund it, and this is what it would cost the citizen. This is what it would cost the developer or whoever would be subject to these fees. I don't think we should be going to a public hearing until we have those answers.
So I guess, Commissioner, just to clarify, this public hearing is really more for the land use assumptions. That's part of the Texas Chapter 395. And so the public hearing is not really for the fees and what that calculation is. It's more for, do they agree on the public land use assumptions that we have? Are we growing at the rate that we are recommending?
But I think what the
The
commissioner
rec-
saying is
I mean, my
that prior,
concern
is
is-
that part of this public hearing process, what we at some point, just like we did with the parking stations, is going with what our proposal is prior to getting feedback. So we can add additional public meetings as part of this process.
And I
It's just
understand it's
normally
two
a first
very
step.
distinct concepts. One is the overall plan, how you intend to do it and where you anticipate the needs are going to be. And then the second one is the costs that are going to be associated with it. I get that. And I do have a question though, since we may have TERSs established in some of these areas, how do these impact fees work when it comes to TERS? And some of the monies from the TERS going back into infrastructure and improvements, is any of that affected by these types of fees?
I
Yes,
would say this-
potentially,
go ahead.
yes. If those, I'm sorry, potentially, yes. If some of those improvements are identified in a TERS and that's being paid for by the TERS, if there's any other costs that are outside of the TERS, that's what will be considered in the program. But we have to be careful that we don't double dip there.
Okay, thanks.
I would, for future presentations, then I would make a clear separation between the two. Because when I'm looking at this deck tonight, slide 1 says roadway impact fee program. Slide 3, who pays for growth, impact fees versus no impact fees. Slide 5, what is an impact fee? So to me, if average citizen watching at home, we're talking about impact fees. And we're going to have a public hearing on April 19th on impact fees. That's how it comes across.
Yep, on impact fees, but the fee schedule's not
Exactly.
there. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, we can make that clarification for future meetings and make that distinction, Commissioner.
Yeah, if the fee aspect is going to come later, I think that needs to be clarified. But thank you so much.
Will do.
Any other questions or comments from the
Okay.
commission? Sorry. All right, Juan, thank you. Edmund, thank you. Commissioner?
You bet. Thank you.
So Commissioner, one of the things,
Sorry, Carlos. Yes.
one of the things is, as per Chapter 395, it is only within the city limits itself. It cannot extend beyond into the EJ. But the also requirement is, we have to update, if the city adopts this plan and this fee, every 5 years, we're required by state law to update and make sure that any new growth gets incorporated. And so I think at that time, every 5 years, we'll be able to capture what new development has gone either to Lopez or any other areas.
But would there be a process in place, and good point, Commissioner, but would there be a process in place then if there's an annexation? We've seen quite a few annexations over the course of the last 12 months. So if there's an annexation, would that then automatically kick into that annexation? Would there need to be a new amendment, or how would that work for a situation like what Commissioner Galansky is mentioning, or in the event of an annexation?
Yeah, at minimum, it's every 5 years, the update. We can trigger an update as needed. And so Eddie, I don't know if you want to explain on that?
Yeah, sure. So if there is an annexation, we have had an eye toward how the city might grow. We've developed what's called a service area structure, where as new developments or as annexations are brought into the city, they're going to fall into a specific zone. But yes, typically that's done through the developer agreement. If you're being annexed in, you're agreeing to pay the impact fee as part of the annexation, et cetera. But yes, those would need to be amended to incorporate those annexations.
Or even like Coffee Port, right? I'm assuming that at one point it was not that much traffic, and that's why it's only one lane going each way with no middle lane. So how do we project for the future when things might change completely different? And so that we're seeing that it's really expensive to do Coffee Port the way it needs to be done now. So how do you afford something like that?
Go ahead, Eddie.
Okay, so as part of the mobility plan, their travel demand model has been used to identify ultimate needs for your roadway network, but then more importantly, they helped in the sizing of facilities that we're going to be needing to add over the 10-year program. We're not going to be building these roads in 10 years, but we're going to be slowly chipping away at implementing those roads that are rooted in that thoroughfare plan. So that travel demand model has had a forecast at least of 20 years of based on how the city will grow, what the needs of those roadway corridors will be.
Okay.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next item, we have consent agenda items.
You have any motions?
I'll move to approve the consent agenda.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve. Any discussion? Those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed? Motion passes.
Next item, we have items for individual consideration. Item number 1, consideration and action to amend the fiscal year 2021 Administrative Services Agreement between the City of Brownsville and the Greater Brownsville Incentives Corporation.
Good evening, Honorable Mayor and members of the Commission. The Administrative Services Agreement was first approved back in 2021. Before you are some of the changes that are being proposed, and that is essentially keeping all of the services for administrative functions that we were receiving previously, with the inclusion of HR and removing the funding that was allocated for some employee positions. So it would change from 496K to roughly about 136. And just to clarify once more, it's mainly due to the reduction of the positions that will no longer be funded through the services agreement, and now are outright GB positions.
I'll move to approve the amendment.
Second?
We have a motion and a second to approve. Any discussion? Those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion passes. Thank you.
Item number 2, consideration and action to amend the Greater Brownsville Incentives Corporation fiscal year 2023 budget.
So for this item, our GBIC board approved an amendment or reallocation to the fiscal year budget. And this would be returning 1.7 million to the undesignated fund balance. Essentially, as you can see up on your screen, there is an increment of personal services and benefits, and also approved projects. These projects were not invoiced before the end of the prior fiscal year. And so we're including them to be included in this amendment. And there's also that decrease of the administrative agreement that we just went over, in addition to decommitting the funds for Project Bumblebee.
I'll move to approve.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve. Is there any discussion? Those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion passes. Thank you.
Item number 3, consideration and action to adopt resolution number 2023-035, authorizing the Greater Brownsville Incentives Corporation to sell Lot 9 and Lot 10 of the North Brownsville Industrial Park.
So the approval of this resolution essentially provides for the permission to sell Lot 9 and 10 as the item described, in addition to designating signatories. Lot 9 and 10 have been previously approved. What I can share is that they're being sold at appraised value. There also is for a spec building that is speculated to be 120,000 square feet. This will be built out in 2 phases, so roughly about 60,000 square feet per phase.
I'll move to approve.
I have a motion to approve.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any discussion? Those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion passes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Item number 4, consideration and action to approve resolution number 2023-032 to conduct a public hearing on April 18, 2023 to consider the adoption of land use assumptions and a capital improvement plan for the possible imposition of roadway traffic impact fees in accordance with Chapter 395, Texas Local Government Code.
So Mayor and City Commission, again, we're here to ask for your approval on the resolution to conduct a public hearing on the land use assumptions and capital improvement as part of the traffic impact fee study. And so something, Commissioner De Los Santos, I know that you're concerned, it's something that we can for sure message better to the public and what this public hearing actually means. And of the overall goal of proposing some type of fees.
All right.
I'll move to approve with Commissioner De Los Santos's recommendations.
We have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion and a second. Any discussion? Those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion passes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Item number 5, consideration and action to acknowledge the financial statements and cash investment report for the City of Brownsville for the first quarter ended December 31st, 2022.
Our favorite presentation.
Good evening, Mayor, council members, and city manager. It's a pleasure to be in front of you for the first time this evening. We will provide a brief update on the Q1 FY 22-23 results. We'll focus on the P&L for a few funds and then provide graphs, as everyone seems to like graphs better than just pure numbers. Since this is a report for Q1, it's prorated. So the benchmark point for revenue and for expenses 3 months over 12 is 25%. So we'll try to comment on exception items when we go through it. So looking at the citywide page, the overall fund revenue is at 74.5 million through Q1 compared to 68.7 million last year. That's up a very healthy 5.8 million or 8.3%. So first quarter came out of the door really, really strong. The strong increase is being driven by primarily a few sources. One is the general fund, which where we saw property tax up 4.8% and sales tax up 4.0% year over year. Landfill is also doing real well. It's almost up $1 million year over year, primarily due to the addition of the Harlington contract. The only category that is low is MVPS, which is at 3%. And that's due to the timing and the parking meter rollout. On the expense side, overall expenses for the citywide funds are at 21%. So remember, our benchmark is 25. The general fund is right at 25, right where it should be. Bridge expenditures are at 0% due to the timing of the capital outlay program. The only category that's over is MVPS. Again, this is due to the capital purchases of the parking meters. So overall, the funds are right where they should be through Q1. Moving to the general fund. So on the general fund, revenues are at 46.9 million versus 47, almost 47 million versus 45.3 a year ago. The two needle movers, as we talked about, are property tax and sales tax. Traditionally, the city collects between 98 to 99% of all current year tax collections for property tax. So right now, we're a little bit ahead of schedule, but by March, we'll have a firm idea of where property tax have finished. If you go to the annual report, there's a statistical section, and within that section, it shows a 10-year history of property tax collections. Every year has been 98, 99. There's only been one year that was at 96. So we're hoping that this year will produce the same sort of performance. Sales tax is up 4% year over year and already 34% of budget. Very, very strong. As you know, excess sales tax over budget will be used to fund any mid-year budget amendments the city manager's office wishes to come forward to council for in the next month. On the expense side, we talked about looking at those items that were over 25%. There's only three areas. Public Works is at 28%. And the reason it's a little bit over budget, the run rate, is because there was $200,000 worth of maintenance expense for the quarter. Public Safety is at 29%. It looks over, but we got grant revenue during the quarter, which offset the additional expense. Likewise with Public Health, it's at 30%, but there also we got grant revenue. So those two of the three categories that look like they're overspent really aren't. So all in all, the general fund is right where it should be. We talked a little bit about landfill, and it's up over $1 million year over year, but it's also slightly below budget. The run rate of 25%. We recognize revenue on a cash basis. So our last payment from Harlingen didn't come in before close of the quarter. It came in post-quarter. So when that's posted, it'll be well in line with budget and still strong year over year. Expenses are only at 21%, which is a good sign. The transfer to the general fund traditionally here has been done on an annual basis. In future months and future quarters, we'll do it on a quarterly basis. That way it trues things up when it should be. So this one, next one's sort of fun, the airport fund. We had that real neat announcement last week about Avelo, and no doubt the future quarters here, the financials will look a little bit better. Right now, including grant revenue, you see of the $180,000. Total Q1 revenue is at $931. Expenses were at $870 for a net operating profit of $61,000. However, keep in mind this sheet does not show debt expenses. So we need to get a little better on our performance in future years in order to cover our debt. But with the new announcement and the momentum going at the airport, we think it's going to get better through time. So very good trend. The bridge fund, it's at 41% of budget, so it's ahead of schedule. It's not that the revenues have been that great. It's been the fact that the budget was a little bit conservative, but this fund is strong. This is also another fund where we don't show a operating expense transfer. They had waited in the past on an annual basis. Going forward, we'll do it quarterly. Gulf Fund. This is sort of a fun one. We show the revenue going from $103,000 last year, first quarter, to $107,000. It's a 3.6% increase. However, expenses were at $212,000, so there was a loss for the quarter. Council recently approved some price increases at council a few sessions ago. So we think going forward, the losses will lower and performance will get better in subsequent quarters. The funding for the employee benefit fund looks complicated. You have employee claims, you have prescription drug fees, you have a stop loss coverage. But the thing to look at here is we had revenue or contributions from employees of $3.3 million. And we have expenses of 3.2. So we're okay. We're right where we should be. It's covering its cost. You have to forgive me. The next one's investments. I get a little bit more excited on investments than I do on debits and credits from accounting. So the backdrop of the expenses or investments is back during the pandemic, the yield curve was flat. If you invested short-term or long-term, there was no difference in the rate of return that you were getting. Then in about September of last year, the Fed started increasing rates. So we saw in the 7-day yield back in September of 2021 a 0.0428, which is less than 0.5%. And then in September of 22, another year later, it went to over 3%. And when we closed the quarter, December, which is what we're showing on the right-hand side, it was 4.52%. So you're seeing that over a year and a half, the Fed went up over 400 basis points. And the reason I'm going through that history, it's what's driving our investment income. We had $1.7 million on the right-hand side of investment income for the quarter. That's more than the budget for the entire year. It's not that we're rocket scientists, we just had the result of higher interest rates. And we'll see on an upcoming slide, those higher interest rates and fighting inflation also hurt our permitting. So when the investment side did better, permitting didn't do as well because of the higher interest rates. We talked about property tax and how strong it's been so far this year. This slide is just showing that when property tax comes in, it doesn't all go to the general fund. General fund gets 62% and 38 is going to debt service collection. And if you looked on that first slide where we had the citywide performance, the reason why the debt service fund had such a high balance is we make debt payments in February and August. So this is the first month we had a payment, the next one's in August. So the fund was flush going into the end of the quarter. Sales tax collection, we talked how it's been over 4%. The thing I want to point out here is really, really strong, and it shows systemic growth, not just one-time building growth, is that the trailing 12-month for sales tax collection was 9.35. So meaning the 12 months that just ended in Q1 versus the 12 months of the prior year at 9.35. So that's showing that it's not just one-time building, it's sustained organic growth, which I view as very strong, especially during an economy where you got higher interest rates. This is the offset of the investment slide where we showed it was so positive. This one shows permits down 45 million. And the one category that's down is your very first line. It's the 36 million. I really believe that's a function of interest rates, not unperformance or non-performance from the city. It's just what happens when interest rates go up.
Right, and the rising cost of materials.
Yes. So that's all I have. I've tried to make it brief, tell a story, and highlight the main funds, but a pleasure getting in front of you. Are there any questions this evening?
I actually wanted to ask, when you said that, I know there's very strict rules on investments and what a municipality can invest on. But for example, how you said how we had to ride when it was, I think, 0.5% of interest. What can you do to offset that? I know, other than just ride the wave. Because now you said that they're over 4%, I think it was?
4.5.
Yeah, the city invests the bulk of its investments into what's called 7-day government bond pooled funds. And we get rates that are indicative of what they're paying on money market funds across the country. One thing that we could do when the yield curve is going up is the city can buy T-bills, which have a little bit higher rate of return. And we can do a ladder, so they come due every 90 days and then you replace it. That's one thing we could possibly do in the future to increase our investment income.
Oh.
Good question, thank you.
Any other comments or questions? If not, I'll entertain a motion to acknowledge.
I'll move to acknowledge.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion passes. And thank you.
Thank you for your time, appreciate it.
Thank you.
Mayor, it is now 6:23. If you would like to make a motion to go into executive?
So moved.
We have a motion and a second to go into executive. Those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? All right. Executive session.
The following items will be considered during the executive session. Item number 1, closed session pursuant to Texas Government Code, Sections 551.071, consultation with attorney, and 551.072, deliberation regarding real property, to receive legal advice from legal counsel regarding Project Instanton. Item number 2, closed session pursuant to Texas Government Code, Section 551.071, consultation with attorney, including contemplated or pending litigation and/or settlement offer related to Paul Seals, Port Isabel, Laguna Vista versus Brownsville. Item number 3, closed session pursuant to Texas Government Code, Section 551.071, consultation with attorney, including contemplating or pending litigation and/or settlement offer related to PITA.
All right, we're back from executive session.
It is now 6:56. Possible action on any items as discussed in executive session. Item number 1, consideration and action, if any, on resolution number 2023-036 related to Project Instant.
I'll move to approve Resolution 2023-036.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion passes.
Item number 2, public hearing, consideration and action, if any, on the first reading of ordinance number 2023-1716 related to Paul Seals, Port Isabel, Laguna Vista versus Brownsville.
Any motions?
Public hearing, Mayor.
Oh, all right. This is a public hearing. Is there anybody here who wishes to speak on this item?
I'll move to close public hearing, Mayor.
We have a motion to close and a second. Those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? All right.
I'll move to approve ordinance 2023-1716, first reading.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve. Any discussion? Those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion passes, and there's no action on item 3. Is there any motions to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn, Mayor.
We have a motion
Second.
and a second. Those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion passes. We stand adjourned. Thank you all.
It is 6:57, meeting has ended.